Welcome, everyone, to our next talk as part of CPO Mastery Conference. We're thrilled to be joined by Lauren Steinberg, who is the Senior Vice President at Loblaw Digital. Loblaw Digital is the e-commerce and digital arm of Canada's largest retailer. Lauren brings a wealth of experience, having led multiple teams at Loblaw, Shopify, and The Body Shop. At Loblaw Digital, she is responsible for over $3 billion of e-commerce P&L and leads multiple digital platforms, including online grocery, digital pharmacy, apparel, beauty, and loyalty. Our talk today is going to focus on three themes: digital transformation in the retail industry, advice for aspiring product leaders, and the future of product management. Lauren, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Mo. Great to see you.
Awesome. I'd love to kick it off by learning a little bit about your current role. Could you give us a brief snapshot of your scope and mandate at Loblaw Digital?
Yeah, sure. So for context, I know we've got folks from around the world, I think, here today. So maybe for context, Loblaw is a 100-year-old company. It's Canada's largest and most successful retailer, a $50 billion enterprise. We operate across a number of verticals, everything from banking to apparel to beauty, but our largest areas are grocery and pharmacy. So we have about 2,000 retail locations across the country, and over 30 million Canadians shop in our stores on a regular basis. The population of Canada is only like 35, 36 million, I think. So pretty much everyone but babies is shopping in our stores. So we have incredible scale, as you can imagine. Loblaw Digital is, you can kind of think of it as a team within Loblaw that builds and operates consumer-facing digital products, and that includes e-commerce businesses. So, our websites, our mobile apps, they're visited by millions of people every single day. They generate billions in revenue. And within Loblaw Digital, we have over 500 colleagues that span across functions like research and UX and product, experimentation, analytics, and then engineering, data science, growth, marketing, ops, and then some. And really, it's fully enabled teams who leverage our incredible enterprise assets, so like our vast customer base, the rich data that we produce, and the incredible scale to just build and operate like best-in-class digital experiences. And those are really different depending on the vertical, but we've got like a bunch of passionate folks that just love what they do, love the impact they can have. And my day-to-day is just a lot of fun leading some really talented folks to achieve just some really great things.
So Loblaw was in the midst of a massive digital transformation pre-pandemic, and the pandemic required you to scale up very quickly. What were the biggest capabilities that allowed the teams to be able to do this? And what are some lessons learned from this experience?
Yeah, so like I said, Loblaw they're Canada's largest grocer, and so when the pandemic hit, like not surprisingly, we saw enormous surges in demand, and that happened overnight. Particularly in online grocery, more Canadians were choosing to stay home, do their shopping online instead. And so thankfully, we had actually invested in infrastructure to support like spikes in traffic and like volume. We had recently migrated many of our services onto GCP, for example, so it was easy to scale up and scale down. And so while many of our competitors were actually lights out for days, sometimes weeks, we were open for business that whole time. But that didn't mean it was smooth sailing. Like we literally had to rip apart our product overnight. We were removing features that just weren't necessary, like stripping away things like lists. Like no one was using lists anymore. They were just buying and buying quickly. We had to eliminate a bunch of calls that were slowing down the site with that many users being active. We were building a lot of new functionality to prioritize our service for like high risk groups and healthcare workers, for example. So building spokes overnight where these folks who were working around the clock, we could get groceries directly to them in bulk versus having them, they didn't have time to get to a store to pick up. So we had to actually, and one of my favorite was we stood up manual fulfillment centers, micro fulfillment centers, manual picks, to support the surge in orders and volume. And then we had to build all the tech that went along with that within weeks, which was just incredible. So, when you ask kind of like what were the biggest capabilities that enabled us to do that, I'd actually say it was more so like maybe not capabilities, but a culture, or maybe like a mindset. And I think the two probably that stand out for me, like the first one is this mentality of actually what one of our core values, further together. And because we have teams working on different products like beauty and apparel and loyalty, when the surges from COVID rolled in, our online grocery product, like we actually asked folks across all teams where demand had essentially flatlined, like no one was buying clothing and beauty in the first like couple months of COVID, right? And we asked, would they come and help? Would anyone be willing to kind of stop what you're doing and come over? And honestly, Mo, like nobody hesitated. Everybody just wanted to get involved. Everyone wanted to make a difference. And the truth is, you can have a good product and good tech and a good strategy, but if you don't have a compassionate team that can work well together, with great internal dynamics, then nothing else matters. And I think our team, we had a lot of that, but I think we really fine-tuned it through this almost like crisis, right? And I think that was just a really beautiful thing that we kind of had a little bit of. We almost like it evolved during that time period where we saw like, hey, look at the power of this. And I think since then it's just continued to grow. And then maybe I'd say the second one is like focus. And frankly, we cut the bullshit out. We're a large enterprise. You get bogged down. I mean, I think you were at LD. You get bogged down by a lot of the bureaucracy. But in this case, we just didn't have the time for it. And like, it's amazing how much you can get done and how quickly you can move when you stop doing the things that just don't matter. I think every day, if you look at your calendar, you look at what you're working on, there's probably a ton of things, unfortunately, we probably don't like to admit it, but there's just a ton of stuff that isn't going to move the needle. And so this is something that, I think we've tried not to lose as things have become less chaotic and demand has normalized, like doing fewer, more impactful things, or kind of what we would call just like rigorous prioritization, So I guess I'd say, reasons we were able to support the spikes, the 10x growth was just everyone's ability to pitch in when needed and to be laser focused on what mattered most.
That's awesome. And speaking to this theme of a great Canadian story, you've seen Loblaw Digital go through a hyper growth period from 5 employees to over 500 employees and $3 billion in e-commerce e-commerce platform sales. We have a lot of aspiring product leaders in our audience that want to go on a similar journey, that want to experience the same type of growth. What are some top lessons that you can share that can help them achieve this level of growth?
Oh, yeah. I mean, a lot of luck. No, but I think maybe 2 or 3 things. So number one is like, if you are innovating inside of a larger organization, like if you're a PM in that environment, I highly recommend building some separation in the early years between yourselves, what you're trying to achieve, and the broader organization, if you can. It doesn't have to be a full moat, but what it does allow you to do is like develop a speed that's more conducive to what you're trying to achieve, and create a culture of speed and agility. And so you don't as often get bogged down by politics or processes that were designed for a very different type of organization and a very different purpose. So, I think I think innovating is really hard when you're within an organization that's just like a perfect, it's just a perfect machine. To go in there and try to like change things is really different. And so as much of a barrier that you can put up, but, that being said, if you take this approach, also be really prepared for when you've grown to the point that those walls have to kind of come down, and what our team refers to as like that whiplash that it's going to bring upon your teams and your ways of working. So I would say as much of a line there, but understanding kind of where and when you'll have to change that. The second, I would say maybe for a different type of PM and a different type of org, but maybe universal too, figure out as early as you can, make sure you understand if you or your boss or your executive team is looking to prioritize top line growth or bottom line growth. And, it's easy to go from like 0 to 100 when you don't have to worry about cost and profit, right? Like you can grow, you can drive a ton of demand and like no problem. But if you grow recklessly, driving bottom line improvements later on without at least considering them along the way, that's going to be really hard. So like a really, really tough thing to go back and fix, to drive, to drive not real demand, not scalable demand. So make sure that you understand which you should be prioritizing
Yeah.
first, and then what the trade-offs are today and what they will be in the future. And I know that's a little vague, but hopefully it resonates with some of you who are listening. And then maybe lastly, I'll just add, like, 'cause I think this is a very Loblaw Digital thing, you really have to believe in your vision. At LD, we never doubted our $1 billion goal. Like, to many outside of our team, but within Loblaw, like, that seemed impossible. It seemed like really unreasonable. People kind of brushed us off. They didn't even really worry about us. They're like, these guys they're never gonna make it happen. But we never questioned it. Like, I don't know how. Like, that goal was broadly shared. We talked about it a lot. Everybody knew that was our mission, and enough strategy was like kind of shared or cascaded to give everyone enough like data or belief to believe it was possible. And even when we were generating like 50 million a year or 5 million a year, we all believed it. We all believed it. And I honestly like, there is a lot to be said about like, you can't achieve it if you don't really believe it. That's such a that I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but like, and it's not enough for you to just believe it. Like, the whole team has to believe it too, because I've seen parts of our organization where they had a really ambitious goal and a bunch of people walking around whispering like, this is never going to happen. This is never going to, and you know what? It didn't happen. Believing doesn't necessarily mean you will achieve it, but not believing, I believe like it's not going to happen.
Yeah, no, this is something that's quite interesting. I've talked to a few leaders, some at YouTube, when they talked about the hyper growth period at YouTube, and the goal they set was they wanted to do 1 billion hours of watch time every single day, which was more traffic than the entire internet when they were very, very small. But I see a similar thing at Loblaw, in that you do set these really aggressive goals, and they have to be believable, and you'll actually get there. As you talked a little bit about, as Loblaw Digital has now gotten bigger, some of the walls are coming down. How do you continue to foster the culture of innovation to make sure that you continue to deliver innovative products, as you might have done in the early days? And I know it's continued, but what are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think Loblaw Digital started as almost like a marketing org. We built pretty crummy products, like, no offense, but like, we built pretty crummy products, and we invested heavily in like growth levers, demand generation, CRM, marketing. We built up like that capability so that we could, inside an organization like Loblaw, we just wanted to prove to the enterprise that there was a product market fit, that like e-commerce wasn't a fad. This is 10 years ago. And just drive a ton of demand to secure kind of like more funding, from the enterprise. So early days at Loblaw Digital, product was hired to just like turn business requirements into tech requirements. They weren't empowered to make decisions. And so, they had no insights, no research organization, very limited UX, no experimentation, like very little analytics capabilities. So it was like, it was hard to find, and it was certainly hard to keep great PMs to join an environment like that, be in an environment like that. And, it was unfair, honestly, to expect that we'd be a product-led org when product didn't have the tools to be successful. And so when I took on the product org about 3 years ago, that was the first thing I did. I built number one, I built adjacent capabilities to strengthen that product muscle, right? Change the power dynamics. I hired like more product leadership to level the playing field, and more senior levels. There was like a bunch of directors and senior directors of every other function, and then there was a bunch of like junior PMs, which again, that's not going to help, elevate that product, create that culture of innovation. Because business people are focused on delivering business outcomes, and operational people are focused on delivering operation. Even marketing folks are just focused on ROI. They're not necessarily building for scale. And so, by investing, I think, in like new tools, driving better insights, executing better experiments, increasing the ratio of designers to PMs, a lot of this kind of indirectly kind of created that culture of innovation, because you had all these very bright, very passionate people with all the right tools. It was almost that perfect storm. And, I know, the reality is not everyone can do that. Like, some people are bootstrapping it, some people are the size that they are, and that's just the way that it is. But, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to ensuring that product managers have what they need to make good decisions and debate bad ones.
That's awesome. I'm going to add a question here on establishing a culture of experimentation, because I know that, Loblaw is one of those companies that, being the size they are, they've established a very strong culture of experimentation. So, what advice do you have for other large organizations that want to go on this journey? Because I think Loblaw is just an amazing example of someone that's actually been able to do that very successfully. So, some advice there would be awesome.
Yeah, you don't need a lot. I'll tell you that. Like, you're right. We're a big company. We have an experimentation team of 3, and it's actually not about building a team that runs the experiments. It's about having evangelists to actually like make sure that there's a set of tools and processes, like structure around that. And then it's about permeating every nook and cranny of like the product organization and all other adjacent organizations, teams too. But actually for us, it was like, we had a really bad tool. It required a lot of like tech resources to even launch an experiment. There was no talk of experimentation.
Mhm.
Right now, every business of ours has a Slack channel, like the business name dash experimentation. You go in there, it's like my favorite channel. It like all of the experiments that are running, what the control group looks like, what the test looks like, what the designs look like, what they're trying to solve. You teach others by being louder about it, by showcasing it. And so for us, it's really not, we're never going to build, I don't think we're ever going to build a massive experimentation team. I think it's about having the right tools and then evangelizing it. It's very similar for us, accessibility, right? Again, it's like educating people, empowering people. It's not about doing it for them. It's about making sure they understand what a good accessible product looks like, what a good experiment looks like, and making sure that that's just part of the everyday. I think it's got to come from the top for sure. Like when I came back, it's like, that's the number one thing. Product managers need to understand the impact that they're having. And you can't do that if you've got 20 PMs on one product, all shipping features. How do you know what's actually driving the outcome unless you actually test and measure? So it doesn't take much. A good platform for testing and a couple of great evangelists to kind of spread it across the board.
That's awesome. And involvement from leadership. I know that you personally were in the experimentation tool yourself at times, which is very rare for someone who's a senior leader like yourself.
Yeah, yeah, I'm very nosy. I definitely like to get into the weeds. But I honestly think for me to really be an advocate for it, I need to understand it and to commiserate if that's the case. But I think in our case, yeah, I definitely believed in it and certainly paid off.
Awesome. Some advice are for folks that are early in their career. You've been very successful in your career. What advice do you have for product managers that are early in their career, who are looking up to your path and want something similar?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's a lot of luck and a ton of hard work. I don't think there's one thing I maybe can point to and say it was, this or that. At the end of the day, like I invest a lot of time and energy into my work. To be honest, I make sure that I do what I love. And I think, it's not my whole personality, but like when I'm working, I'm like super into it. And of course, I've been given a lot of opportunities to continue to do that. So I'm very fortunate. But I think what's helped me, like, I know a little bit of everything.
Mm.
I know how to code. I'm not great at it, but I can do it. I'm a decent graphic designer. Comes in handy all the time. Like, pulling together fake mock-ups or like slick presentations for our management board. I know how to run paid marketing channels. I spend time understanding the capability of or like the limitations of our tech stack. So just like knowing a little bit of everything without going too deep in any area I'm not directly accountable for, it's really helped me kind of navigate different stages of my career and have like a really vast toolkit, for when I need it, kind of stand out that way, like to be able to do a little bit of everything. But I think maybe beyond that, I just surround myself with people much, much smarter than me. I always punch above my weight. And it sounds cliche, but like highly recommend leaving the room if you're the smartest person in it. So for me, it's just about building some great teams around me that are just way better at what they do than I would ever be.
Awesome. And the last question on the future of product management. In your opinion, what is the future of product management? What trends do you think PM should look out for?
it's a tough space to be in product, and I think that stems from product having like very obscure deliverables, like unlike engineering or design, like there are very few like independent artifacts for PMs, for them to like hang their hat on. Designers have wireframes or prototypes, and devs have lines of code, and I'm probably undermining it, but you get the point. For PMs, it's just difficult or unsettling not having anything concrete to display. And so, I think because PMs are judged almost entirely on the output of their team, it's tough. Like it's tough to really be known for something or create that. And I think, the future of PMs is about being the evangelist, like the most vocal, the greatest storyteller, almost like the public relations expert for your product, constantly highlighting it in the right meetings, evangelizing it every chance you get, being the expert or the go-to. And I think having that credibility makes you feel a greater sense of belonging and a purpose, and it gives you more authority, and you can have a greater impact. I think it's hard for PMs to stand out sometimes, and I would love to see a future where they're almost the face of the product. There's so many contributors, of course, and so many people should take credit for a great product shipped. But I think PMs have historically kind of taken a back seat there, and I'd love to see a future where they really are the greatest storyteller, the greatest producer of that vision, and really can pull all the strings to make the desired outcome a reality.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Lauren, for taking the time to share your knowledge and insights with us today. So your advice around innovation at scale, career advice for product management is top of mind for product managers and leaders that I talk to every day. So thank you again for your insightful chat. Folks, please take the opportunity to give Lauren a big virtual round of applause. And we'll be back for additional talks, so don't go anywhere. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah.